is to, really sift through all this material and get down to the nitty-gritty of strategic interaction, but with a particular focus on how game theory can actually inform soccer coaching. Those key aha moments for all you coaches out there.
Absolutely. And, at the heart of this idea of minds in conflict, we've got this Nobel winning field of game theory. And this field was really shaped by the work of John Nash on N-person games and Thomas Schelling's book, The Strategy of Conflict. Now, while these guys weren't initially focused on soccer, their ideas about strategic decision making, especially where outcomes are interdependent, where they really depend on each other, well, those ideas are incredibly relevant to any competitive environment, soccer definitely included. Like, take Nash's work on equilibrium, for instance. This helps us understand why certain strategic patterns become dominant in soccer,
Right. So our mission, if you will, is to take these powerful concepts from game theory and figure out how we can actually translate them into, tools that coaches can use on the field to really understand and improve strategic decision making.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so, getting down to brass tacks, in terms of soccer, what is game theory all about?
Well, basically, game theory is the study of how individuals make decisions in situations where the outcome for each person depends not only on their own actions, but also on the actions of everyone else involved.
Right.
It's all about the interconnectedness of choices and how those choices lead to certain results. So in soccer, we're not just talking about a player deciding to pass, shoot, or dribble in isolation.
So it's not like one player on the field making these decisions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Every move a player makes, every pass, every tackle, even just how they're standing on the field, it all sparks a reaction from the other team. The choices that the other team makes are influenced by what your player does, and the best move for your player then depends on what they think the opponents are going to do next.
Oh, wow. So there's this whole layer of a mental back and forth happening on the field.
Exactly, yeah. It's like a chess match, but happening live, with all these moving parts.
That's a good analogy.
And this dynamic interaction, this back and forth, it leads us to a really crucial element that kept popping up in those sources that you mentioned. We're talking about anticipation.
Oh, anticipation. Yeah, you hear that word thrown around a lot in sports. But how does game theory, really deepen our understanding of that?
Well, game theory gives us a framework for understanding anticipation as something more than just, a lucky guess. It's about actively trying to predict what's going to happen next based on everything you can see on the field. You're looking at the other players' actions, their positions, and really importantly, you're trying to figure out their intentions. What are they going to do? What are their teammates going to do? What about their opponents?
Right, so you're not just watching the ball. You're really watching the whole field and trying to read what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you said, you're reading the game on a much deeper, more strategic level. Game theory provides the tools for that. It's encouraging you to think, okay, if our player does this, how are the other players going to react? And out of all those possible reactions, which one is the most likely given everything that's going on right now? So every action, even something as simple as a pass, it becomes part of this bigger web of possibilities.
Oh, that's interesting. So can we get into some specific examples of how this plays out on the soccer field?
Oh, for sure. Let's take the third man run, for example. That's a classic one. Now, it's not just about a player running into open space, right? The real effectiveness of the third man run, it hinges on being able to anticipate the interaction between two other players, usually the player with the ball and a defender. So the third man, he's not just running blindly. He's predicting how those other defenders are going to react to that initial engagement between the ball carrier and the first defender. He's using that knowledge to find the opening.
So it's like they're thinking a step ahead, okay, those two are busy with each other. That's going to leave a gap over here.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Another great example is defensive positioning. When a defender is facing an attacker, they're not just standing there. They're trying to predict what that attacker is going to do next. Game theory helps us understand how they do that. The defender's looking at the attacker's body language, their position relative to the ball and the other players. All of that information helps them figure out the attacker's most likely action. Are they going to dribble? Are they going to pass? Will they shoot? Then the defender positions themselves accordingly to try and intercept or block.
Wow. So it's like this constantly evolving dynamic puzzle. They're predicting based on all these factors and then reacting.
It is. And even something like a pressing trap, where a team coordinates to press really aggressively in a specific area of the field, that relies heavily on game theory too. You see, the pressing team, they're predicting how the other team will react under that intense pressure. They're setting a trap based on that anticipated response.
That makes sense. We're really starting to see how this theoretical idea plays out in really concrete ways on the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can a coach actually, take this understanding of game theory and use it to train players to get better at anticipation?
Right. So the key here is translating these theoretical concepts into actual training methods.
Okay.
The resources we've been looking at, they really emphasize that coaches need to design sessions that actually mirror those game-like strategic scenarios. It's not just about following instructions, it's about putting players in situations where they have to think for themselves,
right,
where they have to consider their own actions and how their teammates and opponents will react.
Right. So you're getting away from those isolated drills where they're just working on one skill and moving more towards, scenarios where they have to make decisions in real time.
Exactly. Small-sided games and situational drills become really valuable.
Okay.
Because in those formats, they naturally face lots of decision-making opportunities where they have to anticipate and react to the choices of everyone around them, all within a smaller space and under pressure.
Yeah. Okay. Can you give us a specific example of what that kind of anticipation training might look like? A drill that really incorporates these game theory principles.
Sure. One example that stood out from the sources is a 3v3 passing drill.
Okay.
But there's a twist. The attacking team, they have to complete a certain number of consecutive passes within a specific area before they're allowed to make a longer pass to switch the field.
Okay, I see.
This forces them to think beyond just passing the ball. They have to anticipate where their teammates are going to move to find space, and they have to do all this while two defenders are trying to intercept the ball. They have to think, okay, if I pass the ball here, where's my teammate going to go next so they can receive the next pass? And where are those defenders going to try and cut us off?
So it's like they're playing chess with the ball.
In a way, yeah. It's not just about the technical skill of the pass. It's the mental exercise of predicting movement and anticipating pressure.
Right. And the sources were saying that these skills, they really translate to real game situations.
They do. For instance, that midfielder we were talking about, the one in the 3v3 drill, if he learns to anticipate his teammates' run based on how the defenders are positioned, he'll be that much better equipped to make the same kind of predictive pass in a real game. With all 11 players on each side.
Okay, so it's about consciously training the mind to anticipate within this strategic framework. Now, how do you really take this a step further and fully integrate game theory and anticipation together?
Well, the real magic happens when players not only anticipate but understand the why behind their actions. That's where game theory provides that deeper level of understanding. It's the framework for understanding the consequences of different choices, and anticipation is how you apply that understanding on the field in real time.
Okay, could you unpack that a bit more for us?
Sure. Imagine a simple 2v2 drill. Let's say one team loses the ball. They now have a choice. They can immediately press hard to try and win it back, or they can fall back and organize defensively. This simple scenario forces both teams to anticipate what the other team will do and then adjust their own actions. The team that lost the ball, they have to think, okay, are they going to come at us hard? If so, where will they try to play the ball? Can we cut off those passing lanes? And the team that won the ball, they're thinking, are they going to press us? If so, how can we quickly escape and use the space they've left behind?
So both teams are constantly trying to outsmart each other.
Exactly. It's like a game within the game. And the sources also talk about something called constraints-based training, which helps to develop this mental agility even further. Games like Murder Ball, where the play is continuous and there aren't many rules. It forces players to make really quick decisions under constant pressure.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. It sounds intense.
It is. And it's great for improving anticipation and reaction time. Or take Sitzl, for example. The smaller playing area and the faster pace, it demands a higher level of anticipation and quicker decision-making in tight spaces.
It's almost like you're overloading their systems in training so that when they get to a regular game, it feels slower and they can process everything better.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It sharpens their minds, So, in all of this, what's the coach's role? They're not just throwing players into these crazy drills and hoping for the best.
No, definitely not. The sources make it clear that the coach's role goes beyond just teaching skills and tactics. They become like a cultivator of strategic thinking in their players.
Exactly. They have to use these small-sided games and situational drills as teaching opportunities.
Okay.
They should be asking their players thought-provoking questions like, why did you choose to pass the ball there? Or what were you expecting the defender to do that influenced your decision? They're trying to get the players to really think about the game on a deeper level.
Right, to become more aware of their own decision-making process.
Exactly. And this ties into a really interesting concept that the sources bring up, theory of mind. So, how would you describe theory of mind and why it's relevant to game theory and anticipation in soccer?
Well, I think of theory of mind as our ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, beliefs, and intentions, which might be completely different from our own. It's like putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Exactly. And that ability is crucial for anticipation in soccer. If you want to predict what your opponent is going to do, you need to be able to kind of model their thinking. Like, why is that defender standing over there? What is that striker likely to do with the ball based on their body language and where everyone else is standing?
Right, so you're not just reading their physical movements, you're trying to understand their intentions, their goals.
Yeah. Think about a player trying to fake out a defender. They're not just looking at the defender's feet. They're trying to figure out if the defender believes they're going to move in one direction. Then they can use that to their advantage and go the other way. That's theory of mind in action.
Wow. That's a whole other level of awareness. Now, the sources also mention this idea of automation as a subset of anticipation.
Right.
What exactly does that mean in soccer?
It means that through experience and training, anticipation can become so ingrained that it leads to these automatic responses to familiar patterns of play. It's like your brain recognizes the situation instantly and triggers the right response without you even having to think about it.
It's like muscle memory, but for your brain.
Exactly. Like, imagine a midfielder who constantly receives the ball under pressure from a certain angle. Over time, they learn to anticipate that pressure based on visual cues, and they develop an automatic reaction. Maybe they quickly pull the ball back with their foot to create space. They do it without even thinking. It becomes a reflex.
Wow, that's amazing. So they're predicting the pressure
Yeah.
and then automatically doing the right move to counter it.
Exactly. And the sources emphasize the coach's role in designing drills that develop both anticipation and these automatic actions. Repetition and specific scenarios are key.
Makes sense. Okay, what about this next concept? Psychometric mapping and early warning systems. That sounds pretty complex. What's that all about?
This one's about a more subconscious level of anticipation. It's like developing an internal early warning system.
Okay.
So psychometric mapping is about a player's ability to connect their internal feelings and subtle physical sensations to potential threats or opportunities on the field, often before they're even consciously aware of them.
So it's like they can sense danger before they actually see it.
Yeah, kind of. Remember Muggsy Bogues, the basketball player?
Yeah.
Just his presence and his reputation for stealing the ball would make opponents nervous and more likely to make mistakes. Similarly, in soccer, a player might sense that they're about to be pressed intensely, even before they see the opponent coming. It might be a subtle shift in their body weight, a feeling of tension, or a sense of shrinking space around them.
Wow, that's really interesting. So how can coaches help players develop this kind of awareness?
By encouraging them to pay attention to those subtle cues. Maybe after a game or training session, they could ask the players, was there a moment where you felt like you were about to lose the ball even before it happened? What did you feel in your body right before that? It's about bringing those subconscious feelings into conscious awareness.
So by reflecting on those moments, they can learn to recognize those warning signs in the future.
Exactly. And that leads to training those automated responses based on those psychometric cues.
Right. And how does that work?
It often involves using different stimuli in training. Things like light cues, reaction time drills, visual signals, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So for example, you could use color-coded lights. Maybe a yellow light means the player has to immediately turn and shield the ball. A red light means they need to make a quick pass, and a green light means there's space to dribble. The players learn to react automatically to those cues, building those instinctive responses.
So they're basically bypassing the thinking part and just reacting based on those signals.
Exactly. And because there's so much feedback in these drills, players can really fine-tune their reactions and develop a much deeper understanding of what's happening around them.
That makes sense. So the last concept the sources talk about is building a mental playbook. What does that mean?
It's basically the culmination of all the things we've been talking about. It's about helping players develop a set of pre-programmed, adaptable responses for different game situations.
So it's like a library of tactical patterns and movements that they can access instinctively when they need them.
It's similar to that, but it also incorporates anticipation, that subtle awareness from psychometric mapping and the automated responses we were just talking about. It's about really understanding the flow of the game, what the source is called the if then that index map of the game.
Okay.
So the players can not only predict what's going to happen, but they also have a set of effective reactions ready to go. The coach plays a big role in helping them build this mental playbook through carefully planned training and by constantly encouraging that deep understanding of the game.
Wow, that's really fascinating. We've covered a lot today. From the theoretical underpinnings of game theory to those subconscious cues that players pick up on, it's amazing how complex this game really is.
Yeah, it is.
But I think the main takeaway here is that game theory can be an incredibly valuable tool for coaches who want to train their players to think strategically and anticipate what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. And by understanding what their opponents are likely to do and having those pre-programmed responses ready to go, players can really gain a mental edge. As we all know, in soccer, sometimes that mental edge is what makes all the difference.
For sure. So, to all our listeners out there, next time you're watching a soccer game, try to keep all this in mind. See if you can spot those moments of anticipation, those strategic battles that are unfolding with every pass, every tackle, every run. Think about those minds in conflict.
Yeah, it's a whole new way to appreciate the game.
And be sure to join us for our next deep dive, where we'll continue to explore these fascinating ideas and how they can be applied to soccer coaching. Until then.